Hey everyone, welcome to Singularity Computers Client Build 5. Now as you can see, this is going to be a big one. I actually had to do a bit of a balancing act to get all of the hardware into the picture. This system in some ways is actually going to be even more high-end than my personal primary system, Singularity Beast 2. And that's something that I've come across quite a number of times over the years. I just thought I'd clear this up quickly. This is not the 5th client build that I've done. I've actually been doing this for a bit over 5 years now. This is just the 5th client build that I've made a video of. So I'm going to go through the usual process and start by giving you an overview of all of the components that are going into the build. I'm then going to move on and give you a more detailed look of each of the components and link you off to any reviews that I have. I'm then going to go through the build process and show you as much of this process as I possibly can. I'm then going to give you a good look around the finished product, and there will also be performance and temperature results at the end of the build log. So I've got a lot of hardware to have a look at here, so I better get started. The case that I'm going to be using, it's obviously hidden behind all of the hardware, is the Silverstone Temjin TJ11. I will put a link on the screen to a detailed review I did on this case. The motherboard that I'm using in the build is the Asus Rampage 4 Extreme. I also have a review on this motherboard, so I'll put a link on the screen to that as well, and I'll also put a link on the screen to the review that I did on the Rampage 4 formula, just so that you can compare the two. The CPU that's going into the build is the Intel Core i7 3960X. I'm using the EK Supreme HF nickel plexi water block on that CPU. The graphics cards that's going in the build. Now I'd just like to explain something at this point. This client actually sent me some of their own hardware. So basically, they sent me some of the hardware from their old build, and they said, can you build a system around this hardware? Build a water cooling system, all of that. So there is some older components going into this build. One of those older components, well actually two of them, is two XFX 6990s. So they're going into the build in Quad Crossfire X, and I'm going to be water cooling them with EK 6990 water blocks that you can see just there. And of course all the water blocks are matched up, so they're all nickel plexi water blocks. I also have here a water block for the Asus Rampage 4 Extreme, and I have two water blocks here for the memory, so they're EK RAM Dominator water blocks. So the memory that I'm using, which is over here, is a kit of Corsair Dominator GT 2133. It's obviously quad channel to go with the X79 platform. Okay, so I'm a bit all over the place here, but moving down, I'm using a Silverstone 1500 watt Strider in the build, and this is actually one of the components, the second-hand components that the client gave me from their old build. Now you can see a bunch of cable extensions there, and that's actually way more cable extensions than I need for this build, by the way. I just grabbed a whole lot out of the cupboard, out of my stock, and just whacked them down there, but they're all Bitfinex Alchemy black extension cables. So just here I have some extra bits and pieces. I have some coolants quick disconnects. They're the VL4 ends. I have a bits power temperature sensor. I have some EK uni holders and some XSPC radiator mounts. A Silverstone hard drive cage that fits into three 5.25 inch bays. I'll cover all of this as I'm building the system. I'll be showing you all of these bits and pieces and where they're going to go, how they're going to fit into the build. But these are just some of the extras that that go into a build behind the scenes. On the left hand side here I have the pumps. So I have two Swiftech MCP 655 pumps. These are going to be going into a single loop. So it's going to be a single loop water cooling system, but a very powerful loop. So it's going to have 2 radiators, 2 pumps, which gives you redundancy and, you know, an extremely high performance water cooling loop. On these pumps, I'm going to be using full Bits Power mod kits. So I'm using a dual pump top and also the mod kits that go on the, you know, back of the pumps. So that's all black to match up. It's actually the same configuration that I used in Singularity Beast 2. Underneath those is hiding a Lambtron FC5V2 fan controller, so that's going to control all of the radiator fans. Here I have the reservoir, so that's a Bits Power 150mm reservoir. And moving on, the radiator fans are going to be Noise Blocker Black Silent Pro PK3s. They're all 140mm fans. On top of the fans I have some Silverstone 140mm dust filters and some ModSmart Black 140mm fan grills. The radiators that I'm going to be using in the build is the 560mm and 280mm Black Ice GTX Gen 2 Extreme. So those radiators are going to go side by side in the bottom compartment, and that's about the maximum sized radiators that you can fit into this case without modding it, unless you're going to use a short power supply, because the shorter radiator actually goes on the power supply side. It goes in front of the power supply. Okay, next to that I have 2 Kingston HyperX 240GB SSDs. One of them is second hand, so it's one of the parts that the client sent me. So they are going to be going into the build in a RAID 0 configuration. Up here I have an EKFC bridge dual serial 3 slot, so that's going to link up the 2 6990 graphics cards in the build. And I have some more parts just there for that. I'll be showing you how that all works during the build. Up on top here I have the tubing, so I'm going to be using Tygon clear 1/2 inch tubing, and I also have the coolant up there as well, so that's Mayhem's Ice White Pastel coolant, and it's actually the concentrate. So there's 2 250ml bottles there, each makes 1 litre, so I'm actually going to have to buy like another 2 bottles of that, because this build is probably going to take, well, around 2 litres, but I always send the client some extra coolant to top up the build. So yeah, you can see the colour scheme. It's going to be black and white. So white coolant, white lighting, and, you know, everything else as much as black as possible. And up here I have the lighting, and I'm still not entirely sure if this is the lighting that I'm going to be using. I'm just going to see how it looks, how it fits into the build. I might be just swapping to, you know, standard, like standalone LED strips or cold cathodes. So it's the Phobia, well, it's basically a remote controlled RGB LED strip lighting system. So I have a separate video on this as well. I'll put a link on the screen so you can check that out for all the details and see how it all works. Okay, so I think I've covered everything. Now it's time to move on to a more detailed look at all of these components. Okay, first up, the Asus Rampage 4 Extreme. As I said, I have a review on this motherboard. You need to check that out if you want all of the details and specifications, because right now I'm just going to give you a quick look at the board. This motherboard ships with a full copy of Battlefield 3. It has the X79 chipset and socket 2011. Here are all of the accessories that come with the motherboard. You get these awesome black Crossfire and SLI bridges, the OC key, which puts an overclocking overlay up on your screen. There is a lot of accessories in there. Battlefield 3 lanyard, your Battlefield 3 key, you've got a case badge, and a whole lot more, but I won't go into all of those because I've covered all that in my review. So this motherboard takes up to 64 gig of 2400 megahertz memory, and that's overclocked. So yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail, I'll just give you a look around. I will be water cooling this motherboard, so all of the heat sinks are all going to be coming off. This motherboard just has so many features, you know, overclocking features, LN2 features for professional overclockers. It has diagnostic features. I mean, it's got LEDs over here that light up when you're booting to show you which components are being polled, which voltages are being polled, so that you know if you've got problems there. You've got PCI Express lane switches, voltage read points, LED poster. It is an awesome board. Extra power into the board here and here. Extra power for the DIMM slots, extra power for the PCIe slots. It has 40 PCI Express lanes in total. So it means you can do quad SLI with 4 discrete graphics cards. Just a look at the back I/O panel. So there we go. The next time you see this motherboard will be when I'm installing the water block onto it. Okay, here I have the CPU and memory. So this is the Intel Core i7-3960X. It's a socket 2011 CPU. It runs at 3.3 GHz and turbos to 3.9. It has a 130 watt TDP. It's manufactured using the 32 nanometer process. It's a 6-core CPU with 15 meg of L3 cache. Okay, this is a 16 gig quad channel kit of Corsair Dominator GT DDR3. It runs at 2133, 911, 1027, 1.5 volts. So this is great looking memory, but it turns out I'm going to be removing the stock heatsinks and water cooling it. Because of the way the X79 platform is designed, there's one bank of memory on one side, one bank on the other. This memory is going to require 2 water blocks. So once it's all up and running, you'll see exactly what I mean, but it's certainly going to be a very complicated and busy water cooling system because there's a lot of water blocks compacted into one spot. It's going to look amazing. Now for a look at the Kingston HyperX SSDs. So I have two 240 gigabyte SSDs here. These will actually mount around the back of the Silverstone Temjin TJ11, down the back of the 5.25 inch base. It's a great looking SSD. I'll just give you a look around. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see them in this build unless you look around the back of the build, but they actually don't really go with the color scheme anyway, so it's not so bad that you can't see them. So these SSDs have a read of 555 megabytes per second and a write of 510. And it's a SATA 3 SSD which runs off a SandForce controller. So this is another one of the components that the client sent me from their old build. They actually sent me one SSD from their old build, and this one is new. So these are going to be going into the build in a RAID 0 configuration, and I'm looking forward to getting some results from these on the X79 platform. Okay, now for a look at the power supply. This is the Silverstone 1500 watt Strider. So as I already mentioned, this is one of the components that the client sent me from their old build. It's a 100% modular power supply. You can see there it has a peak power of 1600 watts. Efficiency is up to 88% at 20% to 100% load, so it's an 80 plus silver certification. 8 12 volt rails, 110 amps total, peaks at 120 amps, 1500 watt continuous power at 40 degrees Celsius, 135 millimeter fan with a minimum of 19 decibels. But anyway, let's take a quick look at the power supply. So it's a massive power supply. I think it's 220 millimeters long. So that's definitely something to consider when going for this power supply. You have to make sure it fits into your case. Okay, so just giving you a look at the modular connections there. Just a look at that side. And now for a look at the back. Quick look at the top. It really needs a clean before I install it. It's pretty dirty, covered in finger marks. So you can see plenty of ventilation on the back, but this power supply actually has a different plug. It has a really beefy plug. So it doesn't have the normal power supply plug. So you need to have a special cable with this power supply. You really need to keep the one that comes with it. Now for a look at the graphics cards. So as I mentioned, this is another one of the components that the client sent me from their old build. So here I have two XFX 6990s, and these are going into the build in Quad Crossfire X. I'm also going to be water cooling both of these graphics cards, so obviously the stock air coolers are going to be coming off, and these graphics cards have backplates. And I actually haven't done a 6990 before. I haven't put a water block on one of these, but I've put water blocks on the hell of a lot of other graphics cards, including the 5970, and the 4870 X2, which are both dual GPU water blocks. So I'm sure it's going to be pretty similar to those two, but what I was actually getting at, what I was thinking about, is this backplate. Will it be, will I still be able to use the backplate with the water blocks? Hopefully, because backplates look great and they also protect the PCB. So the aesthetics of XFX graphics cards are always very good. They have black PCBs. Just to look around, I'll give you another good look once the water block is on. And I do actually have a graphics card water block installation guide, and I'll put a link on the screen to that. So these might be last generation graphics cards, but two of them, in the scheme of things, is still going to create an incredible amount of performance. It's a very, still a high-end configuration. So I'm really looking forward to getting some performance and temperature results once the system is up and running. Okay, now it's time for a look around the case. It's just going to be a brief look because, as I said, I have a review on this case. It's a detailed 45-minute review. You'll also be getting a good look at the case during the build as well. You can see it's got ventilation through the side panel there. That's into the bottom compartment, and that's where I'm going to be installing the radiators. That's how this case is designed. You can see that the side panel window only really covers the motherboard tray area. There's actually two ducts through the case just there, and that's to give airflow to the 180mm fans, which you can see there through the side panel window. You can take up to two power supplies. The motherboard tray is rotated 90 degrees so that the back panel faces the top here. It's a removable motherboard tray, as you can see. I actually have the motherboard tray out at the moment, sitting just here ready for the motherboard to be installed. There's a 120mm fan here which actually faces the top. There's two power buttons. There's one up the top there. There's actually one down there on the front as well. Two USB 2 and audio jacks, 9 5.25 inch bays. So this side panel is the same as the other one except minus the side panel window. So it has the ventilation, the ducts, and on this side there's a reset button and two USB 3. Okay, I have the side panel off. It's obviously going to look a little bit funny without the motherboard tray. Just a quick look around. You can see all the 5.25 inch bays and the hot swap hard drive bays in the bottom. So they are obviously going to be removed for the radiators. Now for a look at the radiators. This is the Black Ice GTX Gen 2 Extreme 560mm and 280mm radiator. The 280mm actually got a little bit marked here during shipping. There was just something rolling around in the box with it. But it turns out I don't actually need to use this radiator anymore in the build, because I've decided to use a different radiator configuration. And I've actually got a little surprise in store for you guys. I'm going to explain it all later on in the build log. These radiators are designed for 140mm fans, and there's something a little bit different about them. They actually have a 20mm spacing here between the holes. So it means there's a gap between the fans. Even with 140mm fans, there's still a gap between the fans. They're 54mm thick. They have a 20 FPI. They have 2 rows of fins per channel. You can see the dual rows there. And I use Black Ice radiators a lot because the performance is just incredible and the quality is very high. I never see any bent over fins on these radiators, or most of the time no marks. This was a little bit unfortunate. But we have the usual G1/4 inch threads and a nice black glossy finish. M4 threads. So there we go. Just a look at how perfect those fins are. You can see what I mean by none of them are damaged or bent, even slightly. Just a quick look at how Black Ice rates their radiators. So you can see here all of the Black Ice radiators and their thermal ratings, thermal capacities. So the 280mm can handle up to 1100 watts, and the 560 up to 2350 watts. Okay, now for a look at the fans. So these are Noise Blocker Black Silent Pro PK3s, and they're 140mm fans. Before I give you a look at the fans, I'll just give you a quick look at the fan grills that I'm using to protect the radiators, because these aren't actually going on the fan side, they're going on the radiator side. On the fan side I'm putting these dust filters, which I'll also give you a look at. So these are ModSmart black 140mm fan grills, and I find these ones are high quality. You know, the paint doesn't peel off and they're not roughly made. You get some of them where the joint, they kind of break at the joins and there's peeling paint, but these ones are pretty good. Now for a look at the Silverstone 140mm dust filters. I use these in my own builds all the time. In client builds, I've been using them for a long time now. They're a great dust filter. They do the job very well because they have a fine mesh. They also look great. It'll go with this build nicely because of the Silverstone case, Silverstone power supply. They can be used on radiators because of where the mounting holes are. These ones are also magnetic. Okay, now for a look at the fans. So I'll just give you a bit of a look around the box. These are a premium fan, and they look at the specifications. So the main specifications are 1700 RPM maximum, 1.781 static pressure, 90 CFM, 15 decibels, that's probably the minimum. So they come with a couple of extension cables. That one looks about 250mm, and another 1/2 meter one. These are sleeved, and the sleeving is pretty decent. They also have nice black connectors. So there's some good high quality cables. They also come with this silencer, and it has, you can see the centering rubber there to actually hold it properly in position, which a lot of these silencers don't have. And also the mounting hardware is, you know, it's premium mounting hardware. You actually get proper bolts and then nuts on the other side, which actually go right inside of the fan itself. So very high quality mounting system, and you get a case badge. Now for a look at the fan itself. So it comes with a short cable, which is great because it means that you can use whatever length extension cable you want on the fan. This is how all fans should come. So many times I'm stuck with, you know, fan cables that are too short that need to be extended, or even more often fan cables that are too long, and you know, you've got to coil them up and deal with them. Either that or modify them, which is time consuming and a pain. You can see the blades are, you know, the whole fan is black, but the frame is kind of a matte black, and then the blades are gloss, and they're actually transparent. When you hold it up to the light, you can just see through. They have like a really dark tint on them. So it's a great looking fan. Okay guys, that's it for part 1 of the build log. In part 2 I'll continue on giving you a closer look at the rest of the components. Just a little update, between the client and I, we've come up with a name for this build. We're going to be calling it Nighthawk. I didn't actually know the name when I first started filming the build log, so I wasn't able to introduce it as Nighthawk. And what I'm doing here at the moment, I'm actually measuring the case out for some mods. I'm going to keep you in suspense about that. You can check it out in the rest of the build log. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and favorite if you want to see more.